Hello and welcome to the Eurogamer.net podcast, episode, I don't even know, 116, that's probably right.
Sounds convincing.
Does sound good. I'm Tom Bramwell. Tom Champion still isn't here, probably won't be here for a month because he's doing stuff, which he told me this morning, which is nice of him. And I'm joined by Martin Robinson.
Hello.
And Tom Phillips.
Hello there.
And as you've probably guessed from the number of beards on display, this is in fact a Nintendo-related podcast. Nintendo actually doesn't. What are some characteristics of people who play Nintendo games actually that are?
Apparently they have beards, which I wasn't aware of.
I don't know where I was going with that. But anyway, we're all here and we're here to talk about the Nintendo Wii U, and not just because it's a nice thing to talk about, but because you guys actually spent a decent amount of last week playing it.
Mm-hmm.
Tom, since you've spoken up first, tell me where did you play it first of all?
We were at an event. Wow, we're at an event in London.
Probably your beard interfering with your.
I know it's all getting into my mind. Sorry. Post E3, obviously Ollie and the team played it out there in LA, and every year Nintendo do these little road shows where they show it off to press in the local area, so we went up to London.
Isn't that sweet?
Yeah, it was lovely with them. Yeah, very nice to put on a nice show. The coffee wasn't all that though, but still, you can't have everything, can you? Yeah.
This is true, actually.
Substandard coffee maker.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully they can sort that out for next year.
I mean, we didn't have all the jet lag and the fact that we had to go to Los Angeles to play it, so that is an upside. Downside, there was no Assassin's Creed.
Oh. Yeah.
Okay, well, so it's a nice little event. Where was it held?
Somewhere near.
Do you want to know precise details?
Yeah, I want to know.
People can go and mob
like.
it and see if there's still a console lying around the floor.
Was there any good canapé?
No.
There was no canapes or anything.
No,
I think there was. That's what it was. The catering options were. It was just a. It was filter coffee. And I think there was a plate of digestives.
Was there?
That's not bad.
That was polished off.
It's tough
time I went down there. It was
tough times for Nintendo, obviously.
Yeah.
Well, presumably they didn't want you spilling like little mini cheeseburgers or whatever on the Wii U gamepad, or using it as a sort of table.
You could. Yeah, it's basically a buffet tray.
I was going to say,
if
you flip it over, that looks like quite a sort of wipe clean sort of surface.
Yeah.
In fact, given that it's single touch and presumably is it capacitive or does it take a stylus?
It does take a stylus. That's a good point, though.
Because then you wouldn't be able to rest your cupcake on it. You'd have to, because otherwise you'd have to sort of
Because quite often when you're playing games in a home situation, you'll be sloppily slurping.
I often balance food on my iPad while I'm browsing stuff.
Yeah. It's
not even if I'm not even eating. Usually, I just it's good storage space, isn't it? When you're sort of just.
That's how I bring my dinner in. Basically, I just have the pizza just slapped on the iPad and just carry it through.
I've actually taken to sort of putting a little sort of tinfoil kind of thing around the side and just using it as a plate.
That's what we need to get Rich with Digital Foundry on that then, to see what foods
most suitable
gamepads can sustain.
Soup, probably not.
No, soup's a bad one for the iPad as well because it's a very slick surface,
and also dribble off.
Yeah, exactly. Soup has this tendency to pool and
mushy peas. I mean, they're a bit of a thicker consistency. You got to think of the viscosity of these things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, if there's a bit of congenial sort of element to it,
this could be like a little mini game, like balance the baked beans on the iPad, and you have to, use the iPad's tilt controls.
What will happen is we'll get to E3 next year, and Iwata will whip out a video that he's done on the plane or in his favourite, log cabin or whatever, and it will be him, and it'll be like that time with the vitality sensor. He'll just sort of rock up and go, "I made this crazy thing."
It'll be like that time
with my kids.
Iwata just balancing a banana off his gamepad.
Yeah,
he's already. This is probably where subconsciously this has all come from.
Yeah,
he's already remembering that. Do you think that little cabin that, sorry, I know it's a boardroom, I just like referring to it as a log cabin, that Iwata did that video in is where he takes people for a sort of a dressing down?
It's actually an airlock, I think, into Nintendo HQ, that's what that was.
It does look stunningly like that thing that the Russians made, didn't it? For the sort of the faking the mission to Mars, and to test people, they put people in this sort of built this habitat they built.
You pan out and it's just that pine door basically, but it's actually just this massive warehouse.
Yeah, and Iwata's just been locked in there in sort of isolated from the world for like 4 years, which would certainly explain Nintendo's internet strategy. Anyway,
that was easily the highlight of E3. Sorry, E3 was a long time ago, but still, that's my lingering image is Iwata's banana.
Yeah, it was far better than Reggie's French food.
Well, yeah. What is it about those Nintendo guys and food? Well, anyway, moving on to things of mild relevance. So we've worked out that the event was probably in London. In fact, what was the best game that you saw there, Tom?
For me, Pikmin 3, because I've been waiting for that game for about 5 years since Miyamoto blurted out that he was making it at some round table.
He always does that. Miyamoto just gets drunk and turns up at E3 and like with a picture he's drawn or just starts blurting out names. And
he just panics, I think,
doesn't
he? What normally happens is he just realises everyone's just really upset with the Nintendo conference, so he just gets given the bit of pen and paper and say, just quick, draw something. He goes, look, here's my next game.
Right, yes, I'm working on this game because I've just drawn this first drawing of it,
okay.
yes.
Well, give us a short overview of Pikmin 3 and why we should care.
Okay, so Pikmin again, and also it looks amazing. It's basically the best looking game of the Wii U launch lineup. The depth of scale looks great. There's lots of stuff going on the screen. It's it was designed as a Wii game, and it does look a little bit like it's an upscaled version of that. But
wasn't it designed as a GameCube game originally?
Well, I think they've been thinking about it since then, and they were thinking about a DS version as well. But for a first gen new platform title, it looks really, really good.
Still unconvinced about its suitability for the Wii U. I think it'd be beautiful on a 3DS, and obviously it made sense as a Wii game because it was developed as a Wii game.
The sad thing was that at the event we were at, we couldn't actually use the gamepad controls, so we were using the Wii remote and nunchuck.
What?
Yeah, they were having issues with the controls, we were told. So we were using the Wii remote and nunchuck, and the gamepad was there as a map screen.
Right.
Which, to be honest, I barely even looked at, which is a shame. But you can use the gamepad controls. There is this other control scheme, but we couldn't play. So
but the Wii, well, obviously, because when Miyamoto was first shipping out the idea of doing Pikmin 3, he said it's ideal for Wii controls.
Yeah,
and so it seems to me that the premier control scheme will be the Wii and nunchuck.
Pikmin 3 isn't the best way to show off the gamepad. In fact,
brilliant.
It's a fairly minimal use. You can move the map around with your finger on the screen. Obviously, you can't you see a touchscreen now and you try and sort of do that thing where you're like stretching the map out to zoom in as you would on an iPhone or any other.
Oh, don't mention those, Jesus.
No, you can't do that. But you can move it around with a finger touch.
Right.
And see different areas of the map to basically get an overview of the whole thing.
So, although you weren't able to sample it directly, the gamepad controls, do they allow you to sort of control is it basically like an RTS pointer type thing, or how does it work? Do you know anything about this?
You can flick Pikmin using the gamepad screen onto an enemy.
So we've invented Subutio.
Basically. Yeah, it's like that.
That's not a terrible thing to invent.
But the reasons I like it weren't the fact that it was, not a very good showcase for the gamepad. No. It was just, it's a very good game anyway, and I'm already starting to get a feel about how Pikmin 3 will differ from the other two. First was a very sort of survival-based, time-pressured kind of...
Yes, it was stressful, basically.
Yeah, it was, and you had to get stuff done. The second one was very different. You had caves to explore at your own leisure. There was a lot more things you can do. It was
Love exploring caves.
Collecting things, exploring, and taking every single thing you can out of the environment. The third one, I think, is going to be different. Again, it's going to be very arcadey. It is about collecting, but the sort of time pressures are back. And there's a lot more items dotted around the landscape to collect. There's not just one of every type now. There's 15 different strawberries, 15 different tangerines, and it's about maximizing the amount of time that you have to get the most resources out of the environment. And you can see replays at the end of your go, and you can try and work out the best strategies for going the best route and doing things and ignoring the little things and getting the big things which are going to get the most value.
It's a bit like a sort of cross between it's sort of like a scavenger hunt and sort of that episode of The Apprentice where they all go around London trying to find a bowler hat.
Yeah,
I like the sound of that. So that's good. That's sort of just classic game design. It doesn't really matter about the platform. Obviously it looks nice on the.
It does look nice, yeah.
No, that's really cool. And so this is kind of the standout game for you at this point.
I think so. Yeah, it's certainly the best looking game, and it's the deepest looking game, which is really important. A lot of the other games in the launch lineup are designed to take use of the gamepad, like Game and Wario and like Nintendo Land, and they are very fun. And yes, they do show off the new hardware, but. Ultimately, I found they were kind of fleeting experiences, whereas Pikmin 3, I could see myself sitting down and just plugging in for about 10 hours and loving it.
Okay.
Yeah, right. It's a proper cool game, and I guess in some ways it's kind of good that it's kind of sidestepping the gamepad, and it is just a proper Nintendo game on a Nintendo console. Yeah. And all the gimmicks be damned.
I think that, if the worst crime that Nintendo commits with this game is to make an excellent Nintendo game, then I think we will all be very happy.
Yeah. Exactly my thoughts.
Okay. Martin, you also went, what was the thing that stood out for you?
It's another really good core title, is P100, the Platinum, which is a code name for the new Platinum game.
Is it actually a code name? It's not the actual name for it?
Yeah, it's a code name.
Okay.
I don't. Yeah, God knows what they're going to call it eventually. But P100's obviously not the strongest of titles for it.
I quite liked it. It's sort of down to earth and doesn't include the number 3 or 4 on the end of it.
Well, this could actually well be Beautiful Joe 3 if you really want. If you really wanted to squint it in a certain way.
I don't like. I'm bored of sequels. Okay, what is it about P100 that's appealing?
It's a really odd game. It's got a bit of Pikmin in there and a bit of Beautiful Joe in there and quite a bit of Bayonetta in there. It's basically everything you'd hope for if Platinum were going to do a Nintendo kind of game.
How accessible is it?
More accessible than Bayonetta. There's a few kind of odd concepts, but it takes about 30 seconds to get your head around them because you control a crowd of superheroes basically.
It's like my everyday life.
Yeah. And you just go around environments and then just kind of, a la Pikmin, you just kind of get your group of enemies and take down these, group of heroes and take down these slightly bigger enemies.
Yeah.
But you can get all your heroes to pull together, and so in that regard, it's not like Pikmin, because the strategy is such a really small part of it. It's a case of just your character happens to be made up of these 100 different characters.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
You can form them into a fist. You can form them into jelly, and that's to absorb attacks.
And you spawn these things by doing gestures on the gamepad. Is that
Yeah.
right? Or, is it also controllable with the Wiimote and the nunchuck?
No, I think it's gamepad only.
Okay.
But the touchscreen
Progress,
controls seem to be quite. They played a part in it, but they were very much on the periphery.
So it's mostly the
it's quite traditional.
buttons.
Okay. And it played like it's Hideki Kamiya, the guy who did Bayonetta and Devil May Cry, and it's got that kind of really rich, really deep combat in there.
I remember seeing Atsushi Inaba on Spike TV after the Nintendo conference. Is he involved as well?
I think so. Yeah, I think he's on production duties, and Kamiya is the lead on it.
So 2 very, very experienced, awesome Japanese developers on a Wii U launch title.
Yeah, and it does use a gamepad in some more novel ways. There's one bit where whenever you go inside in interiors, the action flicks to the gamepad, and
That's
so you
really,
play
really
on the
cool.
gamepad. And it's a gimmick, but it's a really cute gimmick.
I remember when they did that with Zelda 4 Swords Adventure, when you had the GameCube and sorry to keep mentioning the GameCube, and the Game Boy Advance. It's just never mind. And if you went in a cave or whatever, the action would switch to the Game Boy Advance. I've always really liked that. It's a novel way of making use of it.
But it's a game which is just absolutely overflowing of character. It looks beautiful. It's very, really colourful, but it's got the art design basically seems to be stolen wholesale from Beautiful Joe. All the characters have the same proportions and look exactly like Beautiful Joe, which Wonderful. Is quite heartening if you're a fan of that particular series.
And it's isometric, isn't it?
Yeah.
We should definitely bring back more isometric stuff. Pikmin's not really isometric, is it? It's just kind of it's like a 2/3 kind of angle looking down, isn't it?
Yeah,
but we could get away with calling it isometric if we wanted.
Yeah.
So it is if you want it to be.
Okay.
If you don't move the camera.
We use a console of choice for if you're an isometric fan.
I just like isometric games. Oh.
FIFA should go back to isometric.
Rock and Roll Racing, that was isometric, wasn't it?
I shouldn't admit to this, but until Diablo, that was the only Blizzard game I'd ever played.
Wow. At least you didn't get an error 37 with that. Anyway, so P100 and Pikmin 3. It's interesting that both of the games you've highlighted aren't sort of specifically built around this wonderful new controller, which is one of the sort of the main facets of the console. But equally, it doesn't sound like that's a huge problem.
No, I think both these examples work anyway, just because they are very intricately designed and well-made games, and it's very good that they're going to be coming to the Wii U at launch because that's what Nintendo needs.
Yeah, I can see P100. I could see that on any console. I don't think there's anything specific other than the fact it's got a certain Nintendo sensibility to it.
Yeah, I suppose the point from the getting the console to be a success standpoint is more that they're exclusive and that they're very good, rather than that they make sort of deliberate use of the new elements.
Yeah, the worst thing in the world would be for them to be to have the new controls shoehorned in.
I remember when. Well, get on to that in a second. But I remember when the DS launched, and there was a lot of this sort of debate about whether games should make use of the features and whether they were making enough use of them and so on. And you had like Super Mario 64 DS, which was the sort of, I guess, the main game at launch, and it was, terrible sort of mishmash of different controls, like just rammed on top.
Because because Mario 64 was a game which was built around analog control, and then sort of replaced that with a touchscreen. It never quite.
Well, yeah, worked. I mean, in a sense, Nintendo kind of they got ahead of the curve on introducing rubbish analog on-screen sticks, which now pollute and ruin so many iOS games.
They had all those weird touchscreen mini games in as well.
What, the Mario? He did, didn't he?
Yeah, but then
because
because it's for touchscreen to me, I appreciate having it in the DS, but it felt kind of by the end of the DS's life cycle, although the DS is still alive, obviously, but it felt like everyone has basically just got over it. So you don't need to worry about it anymore.
It was the two screens thing that ultimately was
Yeah.
kind of more significant, wasn't it?
And with the 3DS as well, I often forget that there's a screen down there,
Really?
and it seems to be largely redundant.
I wonder how that's going to be with a lot of Wii U things. I think there will be titles which are built to make use of it, but at the same time, I think it should be optional, and that's fine. If it's just going to be a map there, then
Yeah, I don't think anyone would take much convincing that games can use elements of the Wii U, but they don't have to. It's just about having really good games.
There's a really good point that Chris pointed out about the second screen, which is with the DS, it's kind of fine because they're in close proximity to each other.
Yeah.
With the Wii U, I found it when playing a lot of third-party games. It just completely breaks the immersion because when you're playing a game, you are immersed in it. You're transfixed on a single screen, and you're in that world. And as soon as you're being told to look down at a second screen and perform some ridiculous gesture, then that immersion just goes.
This is something that actually
Yeah.
struck me is that Nintendo's been talking about how we all now have like two screens and we're all sat there with like an iPad or whatever in our lap in the main room while TV's on. The point, like from my perspective, the point at which I look at this is while that is loading something or on an ad break. So I don't know. I can see how that would be a thing. Perhaps an answer to this is for some third-party peripheral manufacturer to create a kind of neck brace thing that you can mount the gamepad on and hold your neck in place, so that you've always got the TV and the gamepad in shot.
like Isaac
aligned
Clarke's
like that.
rig in front of you.
Yeah. You get those simulator things, don't you? You can sort of made out of cardboard boxes. That's basically your front room, isn't it, Martin?
Yeah, pretty much.
So, we could do that. The Nintendo neck brace.
We all laugh. I reckon. We're going to go back to emails in a second. Yeah, exactly. There's going to be something in their inbox.
People who are in marching bands have those things where they can mount the music on like their arm or whatever, don't they?
Yeah.
Why can't we have that?
I was an exceptionally lazy child, and I had to have a bottle dangled above me with a coat hanger device that my dad made for me.
Child?
Yeah.
That's what we were doing earlier. Okay, so we're starting to talk about the hardware a little bit. And before we get on to actually your thoughts on the hardware, I mean, obviously those are your standout games. What were the other games that you saw?
Mario was very fun. It was basically
Mario. That's Super Mario Brothers Wii.
Yeah.
Sorry, you.
Yeah.
Sorry, yes.
That is New Super Mario Brothers Wii, but you can now have a fifth player or any other combination of a second, third, fourth
I don't have
player.
five friends.
You can have an additional player who makes use of their gamepad placing blocks using the touchscreen.
At the risk of, can you play with people on the internet? Super Mario Brothers.
No.
Right. What's the point of that?
That's what I
That's
think.
bloody stupid.
Yes.
What is wrong with these people?
Yeah, I make it a point because of Nintendo Land as well, which is obviously their key game. I'm not sure what's the online deal with that because that can't be played online.
As far as I know, none.
Because that's a
Pikmin
game.
3 is offline too.
It's basically an offline PlayStation Home, isn't it? Really, let's be honest. Anyway, what are the other games you saw? So you saw Nintendo Land, New Super Mario Brothers U, Wii U,
Rayman Legends.
Rayman
looked
Legends.
Really, really nice.
Cool.
And again, that used the touchscreen a lot like Mario, so a second player can interact using the touchscreen and change things in the environment.
Is Rayman Legends, is it different to Origins?
Yes, it's a completely different game.
Okay.
And it's developed crucially specifically for the Wii U, so it looks fantastic. Unlike a lot of other third-party stuff that was on the show, it looked brilliant. It looked really, really nice.
Well, I think that game's always looked stunning. I mean, the more recent Rayman stuff has always looked stunning. Origins was beautiful, and as the 47 people who bought it will attest. So those you saw Zombie U, presumably.
Zombie
Zombie
U,
U.
which I do not get the hype around that. There's a lot of people who are saying it's one of the better games, and it's this really
I was
interesting,
quite down
daring.
with
Is it first person survival horror?
Yeah, it's
Shooting gallery type thing.
Yeah, I mean,
No, but its main draw is the fact it's got this kind of Dark Souls kind of mechanic whereby
You can.
if you get bitten once by a zombie, that's it, you're dead, and then you start as a new character,
yes,
and you kind of inch forward.
that is
which
a very clever mechanic.
It just-
Unfortunately, the rest of the gameplay just doesn't support it.
It does sound like that. It does sound like one of those games where that came first and everything else was kind of piled up around it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It sounds like something that Peter Molyneux would come up with. What if, when you die, you stay in the world and you keep an encounter?
That is a very good concept.
That is a
It's
really
just
poor Molyneux impression.
They haven't. The rest of the game isn't there yet. It's interesting that last year at E3 it was unveiled as a completely different game, I'm not even sure with that concept in. It was
Killer Freaks, whatever. Yeah.
And suddenly it's a different game, and it feels like, I don't know. It just didn't feel enough of a well-rounded experience. I like that aspect, but the gameplay wasn't there to support it. And a lot of the gamepad stuff was quite experience breaking. Like Martin was saying, you get to a door and then you have to do this lockpick.
Yeah, which was awful and one of the worst lockpick mini games I've ever encountered.
At all. And that involves you. I get the idea. The idea is to move the action to the gamepad screen while the rest of the game is still going on. So you can
zombies are chasing you.
Yeah, so you can see that you're never safe. But at the same time, that can't come at the expense of it not being fun.
What was this mini game? How did this work?
So you were just basically moving the tongs of a lock picking
little tumbler things.
Yeah. Into a lock, which was just a case of moving it back and forth with your hand a couple of times until it clicked into the right position.
Okay.
There was that, and then you can also just you move stuff around your inventory.
Inventory management.
With it, yeah.
Yeah.
I made the mistake there because I thought the game just looked like sludge, and I didn't like the art design, didn't like anything about it, and the poor guy who was demonstrating it asked me for some feedback afterwards, I told him by mistake what I actually thought about it, and said, it's I'm not convinced by it, and then he got quite upset and made me play it again.
Wow!
to point out some of the better things about it.
And after the second time?
Well, we played through the multiplayer actually the second time round.
Oh, what was that like?
Where one person has a gamepad and kind of directs the action by putting zombies on the map, while the other player who's got the screen is kind of running around, and it's kind of a capture the flag thing, which was more interesting than anything I saw in a single player. But it was one of those things which I would play for if I ever was in the odd situation of having that game. I'd play for about 10 minutes and then that's it. We'll never go back to it.
Yeah, a lot of those sorts of things just sound really inessential, and although quite novel use of the thing, like they're not novel in the sense that, because we've seen this stuff before. I mean, this isn't the first time we've had asymmetrical gameplay concepts, and these sound quite timid. Although Zombie U, I just got it, and it's quite good.
Well, it's also it's a follow up to Ubisoft's first ever game.
Someone said that, didn't they?
It's really odd. Their very first ever game as Ubisoft was Zombie.
I assumed that their very first ever game as Ubisoft was some sort of asphalt game for the
Commodore.
Yeah,
a launch title, for the 2600.
Where is Asphalt Wii U?
I don't know, but let's careful what you wish for. Seriously, that will be there in all its 2 out of 10 glory, I'm sure. Okay, so you saw those games. So I assume were there other Ubisoft titles?
Yeah.
Cool. Let's not talk about that.
Just Dance.
Yeah. Oh dear. Well, just not. What were the other games that they had there?
So, Game & Wario was actually a contender for my favourite game because it really showed off the gamepad well, and a lot of the concepts were great. Not like they were basically mini games, but not as you would think in the WarioWare kind of style. The sort of larger form factors of the mini games that you unlock in the WarioWare games that sit on your menu as well.
I remember like the baseball bat one.
They're like expanded versions of those, and some of the concepts for the Wii U gamepad are really, really clever. Like the one where you're trying to work out which of the people in a crowd is your friend, who's like a little thief wandering around, and you can hold your tablet up to the main screen and take pictures of the main screen.
Oh yeah.
By the view on your gamepad. It's very clever, and a lot of those things convinced me far more than anything else at the show what the gamepad could do. Yeah,
well, I know we're sort of a bit down on minigame compilations and so on generally because they can seem quite lazy. But I think if anyone's going to give us a good one, it's going to be the guys, the sort of the WarioWare kind of.
It's not got the micro games, but it's got the characters and it's got the humour and the randomness.
I love that Wario games. Always the WarioWare ones because it just feels like you're in the middle of a kind of a brainstorming session at Nintendo and they just throw around all these ideas.
Yeah, some of them work, some of them don't, but that's good.
I always like it because Wario is this kind of prankster. He's like a sort of alternative reality, or alternative universe version of like Johnny Knoxville or something, except not a cock. So I always like that. He's just minding his own business most of the time. Wario, he's having a bit of a laugh, but you see him driving around town and stuff, and then people just give him shit. What's all that about?
Just trying to make games.
Yeah, exactly. So, were there any other Nintendo games while we're on it, or? Those are the main ones.
Well, that was out of Nintendo Land, obviously, which was the big pull.
Oh, good.
We haven't really talked about Nintendo Land, and I think that's sort of understandable. But the games within it sound. I quite fancy the idea of Luigi's Ghost Mansion, for example.
They all seem really good, but they all seem to be centred around the fact that, as you say, we've seen this before with Zelda 4 Swords Adventures, which I think anyone who played absolutely loved it, but you needed to be super lucky to be able to play it because you needed for people at one time who are willing to play.
There are single-player games, but I get what you're saying.
I find it weird that there's no. I mean, I understand it's supposed to highlight the fact that you've got, a gamepad and an asymmetrical gameplay in your lounge and so on. But the lack of online. I mean, if you're having to limit the way that people can interact with one another through your game and your internet service in order to make the arbitrary features of your system stand out, then aren't the arbitrary features of your system kind of silly by definition?
Yeah, and the worrying thing for me is that the gamepad is being used by so many games as a secondary controller for a second person to interact somehow with you, that is another reason why online isn't being used, because they are emphasising local multiplayer.
Yeah. Well, anyway, moving on to the actual hardware. You both presumably through this experience got to have the Wii gamepad in your hands for a certain amount of time. Whatever, come on.
Right.
And also the Xbox controller, or whatever that's called. Did you get to play with the Xbox controller at all?
Yeah, it's just like an Xbox controller.
It hasn't got analog triggers, which is a massive.
Oh God, really?
Yeah, a massive flaw.
Why do they do this? This is just like the internet all over again, isn't it?
Yeah, well, but you've done really well to get a decent controller that's going to work with all these third-party games, apart from the ones which require analog control.
Haven't they learned their lesson about not having enough analog stuff from the 3DS debacle?
Just bring back the GameCube controllers. They were the best controllers known to
I'm surprised they're not compatible. I mean,
they
were really good, although they were a little weird to clean because of the little dusty little hole that was created. FYI.
Just you then.
Wow.
No, what I liked about the GameCube ones is you could press down the analog triggers to a degree, and then they would click.
Yeah, that's a really satisfying click on
okay. The Wii U gamepad.
Oh yeah,
if I've pronounced that correctly.
That is correct. It feels, if in the hand, it actually reminds me of a DSi XL kind of thing. Cause it feels chunky and big and like a toy, and the buttons feel really.
Very comfortable.
It feels kind of cheap in my hands.
No, my main concern was that it would be too heavy. It wasn't. I guess that's basically because it's just a screen and a bit of plastic. All the hardware and innards are inside the main base unit, and it has that sort of curvature to the back that GameCube pads have. That just sort of snugly fits in your palm.
So it's got this Pavlovian effect on Tom. That's for sure. Anything GameCube.
It's ergonomical for sure, but that's about it. And I found it. What I did find it took ages to get used to the fact that the face buttons were below the second analog stick. And I couldn't get my head around that for ages.
Oh, right, yeah. I can see that as being a bit weird.
Just because you're so used to the face buttons being above that analog stick.
Yeah.
And it also, I felt really mal-coordinated playing. I am quite mal-coordinated, but because you're just all of a sudden playing like that, which is, you said it's kind of like the same way you'd play a Wii remote and nunchuck as well. You kind of have that same distance, but still, it felt really odd to me. I couldn't quite get my head around it.
So sort of the fact that your hands are about a foot apart, rather than right next to each other.
But if you played a lot of Wii games, then you are used to that because you're holding two separate things.
Absolutely. Okay, what about the quality of the screen? I mean, I read Digital Foundry's analysis stuff of the weekend and pointing out obviously it's a TN screen rather than an AMOLED screen.
God, yeah. That's the first thing I said.
Yeah, I mean, but the quality, does it seem sort of... does the image seem sharp? Does it really pop off the screen?
I was pleasantly surprised.
What's the viewing angle like?
I was expecting something kind of similar to the 3DS, and it's a lot better than that, I thought.
I had quite a low expectations, but I played New Super Mario Brothers on it, where I kind of did that remote play thing where I took it away.
Yeah.
And it looked much better than I thought it was going to. It's 480p, isn't it? So it's
right.
It's a decent resolution for a screen that size.
Yeah, shrunk down. It looks fairly comparable to the thing on the
colours are slightly washed out, but like I guess you don't expect. I wasn't expecting it to be like a super sterling image down there.
No.
Okay, well that's encouraging. I think the thing that my biggest concern really had been with that for the longest time I've been annoyed about not being able to play Nintendo games in high definition, and all of a sudden they're doing a high definition console where I have to play loads of stuff in low definition.
Yeah,
which could have been a real fail.
Well, I think again that just highlights the fact that it is kind of a secondary thing. The gamepad. There's no game that's going to really force you to look at the gamepad for extended periods of time. It's something to glance at for a map or an inventory screen.
It's worth pointing out as well, and seeing that whole thing about Nintendo in HD. It's quite breathtaking. The first time I actually saw a Nintendo game in HD, like up close. It felt like quite a moment just seeing like the Mushroom Kingdom in proper HD for the first time.
Does it hold up?
Yeah, it looks. I thought a new Super Mario Brothers looked beautiful.
Very, very crisp.
What about Nintendo Land? That's kind of the only other one where you're likely to see sort of the 3D worlds of Nintendo brought to life at the moment.
3.
Well, I suppose yes, but I mean, I guess what I mean by the 3D worlds of Nintendo is sort of your classic kind of Mario sort of environments and those sorts of things. Does it and whatnot? Does it really pop off the screen? Does it feel? I mean, I guess does the art style scale up nicely into that definition?
Some of it does. The Zelda mini game where you're playing as sort of characters who've got that kind of cloth look to them. It's all like made out of fabric and stuff. That looks really nice. There's some nice textures in there.
I played the Animal Crossing one mostly, which just looked like Animal Crossing.
Yeah,
So
it
had
does
that kind of
vary
really
a
flat
lot
texture,
from
doesn't
game
it?
to game.
What do we know about backwards compatibility actually? With it plays all Wii games.
It plays all Wii games. GameCube, no GameCube accessories, but all Wii accessories.
So with Wii games, do we know what they'll look like on the screen? Will they be as they are now on a Wii, or are there going to be any scaling options?
There's no
like
upscaling. They're going to look as they do.
Okay, that's a bit of a shame. I've heard that the actual Wii U box, as it were, basically looks the same, except it's got a bigger ass.
It wasn't finalised. I thought that was just the
ones
the
there
dev
I
kits,
thought
so-
were dev kits
Yeah.
because
Okay.
they had a big ass.
Yeah.
Massive.
I think the actual thing is going to be fairly comparable to the Wii. Not that big.
Okay. Are there any other things that struck you about the hardware, or indeed, I guess, the system software, the kind of the online environment? You got to see any of that? I mean, what did you get to play with
All the system software was kept very much out.
Yeah, we didn't get to play with any of the
hidden away from us.
the Miiverse?
Miiverse, sorry, not the Weverse. So it was just basically the games as they were.
Okay.
The one thing that was worth pointing out, which is I think was referenced to in the really good Digital Foundry thing over the weekend, was just how awful some third-party stuff looked.
Yeah, we need to touch on that.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask you what you, in a sort of a bit of a contrarian sort of way, assuming that there was going to be this tidal wave of love for the thing, and what your least favourite of the launch lineup games so far is. Obviously, in the absence of Asphalt GT, we'll actually have to pick one.
I think the third-party stuff in general, Rayman is an exception to that. I think it looks great. Arkham City, was by far the worst-looking game.
What was it
at
about?
the showcase?
What was it about it?
Well, it's not only the fact that they just added all these features which no one asked for and nobody wants onto this game, and have potentially ruined quite a good game. It's just the fact it just looks awful as well.
It was chugging away at about 12 frames a second.
And none of the textures were loading in either. It was just it looked like a Wii game.
It looked like it looked like
Careful,
someone
we're not
was-
ready to use that as a derogatory term yet.
It looked like someone had ported a game from the very end of the console generation when people were very used to developing for the hardware to the beginning of the console generation when they're not.
Yes. What features have they actually added to it? Because I haven't really bothered to pay attention to this because obviously I own Arkham City and have finished it, and therefore this is irrelevant to me. But I am slightly curious since they sound bad, and I like being.
You can
into
touch
things.
the touch screen. You can
You
direct
can touch Batman.
you can touch Batman. You can run your fingers all over his body, and then you can also
You can grip hold of his Batarang.
you can direct his Batarang with your gamepad.
You could do that
And
with
so-
an analog stick, and it was fine.
And it doesn't work because it was just that
But
really.
it doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work in a Wii U version because people were trying to play it and I had to have someone in hand to explain to them at all points what was going on. So you got to look at the screen now. But I just want to play this game and do this thing which was fairly straightforward and enjoyable beforehand, and now just doesn't work and it is a pain.
Well, with great power and all that crap.
I've-
or in fact, as it sounds, with not enough power.
But it's too early to say. Actually, no, it's not. It looks like it's a great game ruined.
I have so many questions about that game because you've got who's going to buy it because it was out almost 12 months ago.
Reggie will buy it.
What version of the game is it going to be? Is it going to have the DLC in? Is that going to be shilled out to you separately? The GOTY version is coming out in about a month's time for all the other
GOTY?
platforms.
The goatee version.
Yeah, Game of the Year.
I've never heard anyone call it
Never heard it
goatee.
called that
I
either.
just invented that.
Brilliant. I love it. The goatee version.
That's coming out for every other system in about a month's time, and it's going to be bargain bin price with all the DLC, which they've pumped out quite a lot for it now. What version is the Wii U going to have? Is it going to be the final one, or?
I just find it really worrying that that's Nintendo's big third-party offering. That's one they decided to dedicate so much
But
time
they
to.
also said Mass Effect, and they were so pleased about that. But that's probably the worst title you could port over because it's the third part of a trilogy when you had no idea what was going on if you hadn't played the other two. And a lot of the content in the game you won't see because you won't have played the first two and you need to import a save.
They'll probably
for
do
various things to be alive.
You would imagine they would do what they did with Mass Effect 2 though, and have some sort of
They're
when
not
they
gonna
did it on
bother
the.
with that.
No, you're right.
They're not going to bother.
Okay. Batman wasn't the only Warner game though.
Scribblenauts, there was
unfortunately.
Scribblenauts was there.
Scribblenauts was because of the games I saw on at the conference, the stuff in Scribblenauts where you can you can create stuff by slamming words together and then obviously share that with your friends through the Miiverse and so on. That sounded like a really good concept to me. Had a sort of, I think I said it had a sort of a twinge of draw something about it, which may just have been reckless hyperbole on my part. Is it good? What did you think?
I think both of us probably didn't play Scribblenauts because of all the things that's least exciting. It's like,
what are you talking about? It's a game where Scribblenauts is inherently brilliant. You can write something down and then it
great.
comes to life.
It's a beautiful. I know it is. I'm a big fan of Scribblenauts, but it's the kind of thing which I'm happy to play on a portable device.
But it's unlimited now. It's called Scribblenauts Unlimited.
I'm
That's
with
a really
Martin.
rubbish name,
It would need a huge amount of convincing for me to buy it on a home console because I think it works so perfectly on a handheld, and I've been playing it so much on my iPhone, which I bought for £1.50 or something like that.
You sure it's a real iPhone?
Yeah. I got it from China, so it's obviously fine.
Oh dear.
I can't see them getting away with charging £30.
Well, it's going to be on the Nintendo store, isn't it? So that it's not going to be a full retail release.
Okay, well that's better.
Right. Okay, so least favourite game, we're calling it Batman. Arkham City Armoured Edition.
Yes.
Yeah. Was there anything else there that could have vied for the crown? If we're going for a crown with this
crown of poo.
Wow. That's not a crown I want to wear.
I didn't play Ninja Gaiden, but
well, you
James
and most
played.
of the rest of the population.
Our video man James played that, didn't you? And I think it had the
He says
same.
he wasn't very good at it.
for the benefits of people who actually are watching this and got this far, it's not a good face he's making.
No. Okay.
I think it suffered from the same technical issues as Batman, although maybe not to the same degree. Yeah.
Chugged as soon as you did a bit of magic. I should put that on the box. What else? What are some unanswered questions we have about the Wii U?
Everything.
What do you mean everything?
So we don't know.
We know some things.
We don't know a launch price or date. Crucially, we don't know about the packing game
It doesn't matter about the
Because
launch
no one
price
is
or
gonna-
date because you'll buy it anyway.
because no one is going to buy Nintendo Land by itself. Nintendo Land is Wii Play, and unless there's a Wii remote or something bundled with Wii Play or with Nintendo Land, or it's bundled with the system, it's not worth.
What if they bundled it with a second gamepad?
Well, I think they might in the future, but they won't do that now because none of the launch lineup games will need it, and
They've already
games
said it's going
which
to take some time to get
Yeah.
that up and running.
Ah, okay. Because they only came up with it on the plane on the way over.
I would be very happy if Game and Wario was packed in. I think that's a far better
It's too
candidate.
left field, isn't it? I think for
Yeah, it's sort of
as
more
a packing
likely.
game.
I mean, if they're going to have a packing game, you'd say it's probably more likely it would be something like Mario, wouldn't it?
No, that's
Or,
a game that people would buy anyway. That's a safer bet for people to buy than Nintendo Land.
But isn't the point of this that they need to get people to buy the system full stop? And if there isn't, I mean, they used to pack in Mario games, even though they'd be very saleable. But they need to sell people on the system. Although I suppose using a new Super Mario Brothers game when they've already released about 5 of them isn't a brilliant sort of strategy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I think we still got to see the real amount of third party support, which we'll only get to kind of get a real feel of nearer the launch. EA has various EA Sports games, which is going to pop out, FIFA, Madden, blah, blah, blah. Activision has Black Ops, has been rumoured. I'm sure that's going to come out. But worryingly, it wasn't talked about at E3, and it feels like it's being treated like the annual Call of Duty Wii and DS releases. They're released for Wii and DS every year, but Activision never makes any fanfare about them because they're kind of token launches for those platforms' user bases.
And this is a fear that there also is for the Vita version as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
That it's just going to be a sort of token, make up the numbers, contractual kind of job.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think one other thing that it needs to sort out is it still needs to ram home the message that it's a new console. Jimmy Fallon, the US chat show host, featured the Wii U the other night, and he listed it as a Wii add-on. And a report in one of the big US papers called it the same thing. There's this perception going around that it's just, a peripheral or something that you buy for the existing Wii. They need to sort out their
Messaging.
their advertising. Yeah.
I'm still surprised that they went for the Wii U name, because after the pain that happened with the 3DS, I thought they would have learned from that and then just actually gone for a completely new
They
name.
obviously had a gamble and thought that on the flip of it, having a Wii, like the Wii word in the name, because of how well the Wii sold, would outbalance that. I don't know. I think they also need to work out what is their killer app. Is it Mario? I don't really see it because, as you said, there's been a billion new Super Mario Brothers games already.
Yeah, they've eroded the sort of interest in that one.
They've eroded the new in the subtitle. And it's not Nintendo Land, it's a minigame collection. Is it Pikmin 3? I think that's a bit too hardcore and that's not the audience they're going for. I don't know what their killer app is.
P100.
Wow.
I don't think so somehow.
No.
There's been a lot of negativity, and in fact we've been very negative about it throughout the duration of this podcast. But
it's not just negativity; it's disappointment. I think is about it. Like we all have these really high hopes for Nintendo every single time, no matter how many times they jilt us at the altar. We all come back and we all want them to do well because ultimately, when Nintendo does things, they're generally creative and well intentioned, and they are one of the good guys.
Yeah, they're amazing, and I think this is it. I really want them to do well, and that's why it frustrates me. It's like it's
like having a little brother who's quite good at sports.
Yeah,
you really want him to do well, and you love him to bits, but just the little fucker won't put the ball in the goal.
I know. Well, it's like supporting a football team who continually make the wrong decisions and put the wrong lineups out. It's exactly the same thing. I always think that being a Nintendo fan is like being a supporter of a really frustrating football team who you really want to do well, and I passionately want them to.
It's like supporting Newcastle between about sort of 2005 and 2010. There you go. Oh dear. Okay.
I was actually quite heartened at the end of the day because there's a lot of negativity around the Wii U, especially after the conference E3. But having spent a morning playing it, it's got the kind of new and original experiences which we've all been crying out for. It's a move away from that nasty torture porn, which is so wide rife at the moment. And I cannot see it being a success, but I will really enjoy it, and it'll be home to some really unique experiences.
One of the things I really love about Nintendo, I've said this before, but you look at companies, even companies like Sony that have a sort of an aspiration to be creative and create beautiful products at the heart of them. And you certainly look at a company like Microsoft, which has an aspiration to dominate the world and take all of our money, and very little else, and everything else is just in service to that. And Nintendo isn't like that at all. It is a toy company that makes things that they really love, that they want you to enjoy, and their principal motivation is to keep making good stuff.
Yeah.
And
that
definitely comes through from what they're making. It's just that the business side of it is so spastically ridiculous at times that...
Wow.
Sorry about that. It's just, it's really emotive subjects.
I completely agree, and backing that up is a statement that Iwata made in an investor call following E3, which is that, where are all the third-party core games and stuff like that? And what about any exclusives? And his reply was, I just don't think it's the right thing for us to do to argue with these companies to get exclusives. Because gamers don't really like that. And that's incredibly true, and it should be applauded, but it's bad business sense, because that's what, at the end of the day, sells systems.
Yeah, I just one of the things that frustrates me is they must have, all of the money. From the stockpile, from DS being spectacular and Wii U and all the rest of it. And yet they still seem to be pumping out roughly the same number of games as they ever were.
Well, they are the company with finite resources, and the last 12 months have not been financially very good for them at all.
No, but they must be sitting on quite a large cash pile.
Well, and they have a lot of developers in action, but we're just not... Like, the Smash Brothers studio that just finished Kid Icarus, that's working on the new Smash Brothers, but that won't be out for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And Mario and Zelda have real long turnaround time.
Smash Brothers one.
Yeah, 3DS Wii U. The main thing that I expected to see at E3 and didn't was Retro Studios' new game, because they've been working ever since Donkey Kong Country Returns on a new thing, which is presumably Metroid Prime.
Or Donkey Kong Country Returns.
And that wasn't shown either. So these games are being made, but Nintendo are frustratingly secretive.
Have we run through every development studio and worked out what they're doing?
Oh, they've got so many, haven't they?
I did that actually the other night, and
just to get yourself to sleep.
Before you went to sleep.
There's still a few that we don't know what they're doing. Although some people could have contributed a mini game here and there to Nintendo Land. I'm sure that was collaborative.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Okay, well, it's been really interesting hearing what you guys, particularly you, Tom, as a massive Nintendo fan, think. I think if there's a thing that comes through this most clearly for me is that we all really want Nintendo to do well, and by God we're going to moan about it in the meantime if it doesn't look like they won't.
Well, we moan about it because we wish them to do better.
Exactly. That's exactly it. It's why we moan about our younger siblings. It's why we moan about rubbish football teams, because we want them to do well.
Because we care.
Yeah, because we care, exactly. And on that note, I think we've probably had enough of all this rubbish, at least for 1 week. So we'll be back next week with, God knows, something we've made up that morning. Thank you very much to Martin and to Tom.
Thank you.
And to James. Hello, James. Yeah. And we'll see you all next week. Thank you. Bye.